Om Agyantimidandasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshurun militam jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juthapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatham Sahakana Raghunathan Bidham Tham Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Bitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patithanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hari I am very grateful to be with all of you this evening. January is a very pleasant, special month in Mumbai. And tonight we have so many wonderful guests, among them some devotees who have come from distant places. We have Miles and Melissa, who have come from Hawaii, the island of Kauai. During our book tour last year, we gave a talk at the Pacific Ocean Church or something like that. And I met these two wonderful people, and Miles and I were talking, and it happened to be that he grew up just about 3 miles from where I grew up, in the same little village. And he found out about our hospital, and he came and has been working about 8 hours a day. Huh? How many hours?
9, 10, 12, 10 to 12.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me for minimizing your devotion. This is how he spends his vacation. Serving patients for 12 hours a day. And Melissa is a veterinarian, and she loves to serve animals, knowing that Krishna is in the heart of every little animal. So we're so happy that you're here with us. And we have Brajalila Devi and Ekavir Prabhu, who have come all the way from Washington, D.C., the capital of America, where actually they travel quite a few places all around the world, doing counseling, marriage counseling, psychological counseling, human counseling. This is the age of counseling. People just have so many problems of every level. Personal problems, relationship problems, economic problems, occupational problems, and so many problems. They're very compassionate. And when their beloved Guru, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, when he was on his last days in this world, for about a year they were at his side, 24 hours a day, serving him. And during the last 2 months I was along with them. They were in charge of his physical care, and they gave me charge of his spiritual care. So it was a very deep spiritual, emotional experience we all passed through serving together. We also have, for the first time in their lives, coming to India, we have my younger brother, Larry, and his good wife, Lori. Larry and I shared the same room together, tiny little room, for 12 years, until I escaped and moved to the basement. But he's always been very gentle, very kind, very loving person. And we were always very good friends, as much as humanly possible as brothers in the United States of America. Sometimes among brothers in the West, the most intimate form of expressing love is through fighting. But I was 4 years older than him, so it wasn't a problem for me. In those days, 4 years is a lot. And Larry, perhaps if he likes, he can talk about this a little later briefly, but when I made that journey to India in 1970, you were about 15 or something? He was about 15 years old. I was 19. And I told my brother and my mother and father that I'll be back in 3 months for the next semester of college. And they really didn't want me to go. Going to Europe was quite a leap of faith for parents in those days. So 3 months passed. And then and then another week passed. And another week passed. And another week passed, and they heard nothing from me. They had no way to know where I was, no way to contact me. College started, all the classes were in session, and they still hadn't heard anything. They had no idea if I was dead or alive. They had no idea what country I was in. what continent I was in. They had nowhere to look. And about 4 months later, they received a letter. The letter explained how I was going for higher education in a more inclusive way than college. I said, instead of just studying things, I'm going to see for myself. What education is better than this? And I told them I had no money. They knew that already. And that I was hitchhiking to India. And that my friend, Gary, who they knew very well, he was no longer with me. And then I ended the letter by telling him to do something that was humanly impossible. I said, please do not worry. The letter was postmarked Iran, Tehran, Iran, with no return address. So I don't know what happened on the other side, but if Larry a little later wants to explain, then he can, if your heart feels inspired to do so. But when I returned some years later, he was so eager to know about everything I did. And all I told him about was Krishna, because I was living in Vrindavan. I remember we were sitting near the Atlantic Ocean in Florida where my parents had moved, and I was telling him the whole story of Vasudeva and Devaki and how Krishna was born in a prison. And he was really listening. It was extraordinary. And he was quite fascinated by my lifestyle, because I refused to sleep on the bed. In fact, I refused to sleep indoors. My parents had a little apartment. What was it, on the 5th floor? It was on the 4th floor. And there was hundreds of apartments in these buildings. And there was a little patio about the size of where I'm sitting now, maybe a little smaller, just cement that came out of the building so you could sit outside. And I slept on the cement outside under the moonlight, and I felt this is such luxury. And at 4 o'clock every morning, they'd hear me ringing bells and offering Mangal Arati. So it was my parents were bewildered and Larry was fascinated. And he met Srila Prabhupada several times. He visited us at New Vrindavan many times. And Larry became a musician. And he plays about 20 different instruments, very excellent musician. And that's what he has given his life to for all of these years. And over all the years, whenever I speak to him, he always greets me, Hari Bol. He met his beloved wife, Lori, and she was a very courageous social activist back in the 1960s. Really a person who believed in justice and freedom, a person who was willing to really stand up for the rights of the people who really didn't have freedom. And she also is an entertainer in her own way for children, as far as I know, and a wonderful lady. So since 1972, Larry has wanted to come to India. And finally, a few days ago, he came. very grateful that you are here. And let us welcome all of these special guests by very loudly chanting Haribol. Speaking about traveling, in October of this year, they released this book, The Journey Home, in England, the United Kingdom, and we have two special guests from the United Kingdom. Mr. and Mrs. Agarwal, they're also initiated devotees, and one of the top doctors of urologists of India, of UK, and Mataji is wonderful, wonderful devotional personality. We're so glad that you're here. And they helped to set up this book tour. I was speaking at one event at London University, the SOAS. What is that, South, or what does it stand for, SOAS? You could look it up if you like. But it's a very, very prominent university in London. And I gave a talk about, they asked me to speak briefly about the subject matter of the book, The Journey Home, so I spoke. And I talked about hitchhiking from London to India and all around India. And at the end of the class, students were coming up and meeting with me. And this one very nice young girl, very pretty girl, maybe about 21 years old, and she was very enthusiastic. And she said, I really appreciated your talk. She said, the reason I appreciated it so much is I am the president of the British Hitchhiking Association. I didn't know such a thing existed, but it does. She said she was the president, the acting president of the All British Hitchhiking Association. And she said, after hearing your story, I am so inspired. I'm going to begin to plan to hitchhike from London to India. She's a 21-year-old girl. And she asked for some guidance, because I had already done it. I did it 41 years ago. So I looked at her, and then I closed my eyes, and I said a little prayer to Krishna to give me the proper guidance for this young lady. Would you like to hear? I told her, my sincere advice to you is you should hitchhike to the Heathrow Airport. And then take an airplane to India. Because Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, it's Khyber Pass, it's not so safe for a young girl like you these days. But she was ready to do it. I don't know whatever happened to her. But it's fascinating how young people are so open for adventure. There's a story, it was a book actually, about a young man whose father died. And he was told that his father had left him as an inheritance a very valuable treasure. But he didn't know where it was. So the book is about his travels, trying to find where his father left that treasure, because it was meant for him. He traveled hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. His whole life he traveled looking for the treasure. And years later, without finding it, he died. And his body was shipped back to his house, where he was to be buried in his backyard. And as they were digging his grave, they found the treasure right in his own backyard. That's very much the story of life. When I lived in the Himalayas, I met a yogi who told me a story about the musk deer. This deer has a certain organ in his body that releases an ambrosial, irresistible fragrance. Have any of you ever actually smelled the original musk? Well, we have one devotee, Sitaram, Dr. Alwa, and in his cabinet he has all these secret hidden treasures. And he has the musk organ from a deer. And as soon as he opens the cabinet, the whole house smells like nectar. It's like nothing else. So this deer is smelling it and wants to find it, wants to find the source of this fragrance. And he too, his whole life, according to the analogy, the legend, he's searching in forests. He's going in thorn trees looking for it. He's crossing mountains. He's crossing rivers, not knowing that what he's looking for is within himself. This is the basis of the Bhagavad Gita. Anandamayo Vyashat. The nature of every living being, whoever we are, whether we're big or small, or black or white, or red or yellow or brown, or whether we're men or women, or from the east or the west, or from any religion or no religion, everyone is looking for pleasure. From the little ant to the big elephants, to the presidents and prime ministers, everyone is looking for pleasure. And everyone is trying to avoid what interrupts pleasure, which we call pain. It's our inherent nature. And the Gita tells us, what is the origin of that propensity? It is who we are. Dehinosmin yatha dehe komaram yovanam chata. This body is a temporary vehicle. We're seeing through the eyes, hearing through the ears, tasting through the tongue, thinking through the brain. But who are we? We are that Atma. We are the living force, or the soul. And the nature of the soul is that it is Satchit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. The very thing that everyone is looking for. We're looking for long life, knowledge, and happiness. But the nature of this world, whoever we are, whatever arrangements we try to make, there's so many frustrations. Because it's the nature of the world and the nature of the body. Adhyatmaka, there are 3 types of miseries. Adhyatmaka means the sufferings of the body and the mind. Whoever we are, diseases, injuries. We have Dr. Agarwal, Sundarananda Prabhu, he's a urologist. His whole day, every day, is just seeing people who are suffering bodily pains. And sometimes you can help them and sometimes you can't. But you can try. Bhaktivedanta Hospital, you have so many doctors and nurses and everyone. It's incredible. One of the most common things that people tell me in the East and West, because I meet people in hospitals in the West too, is in the emergency or the casualty department, when people come in and by ambulances. One of the most common things they say is, I never thought this would ever happen to me. Padam padam yadvi padam natesham. But the nature of the world is there's dangers anywhere. So miseries of the body, so many things. Even if you're a multi-billionaire, if the wrong mosquito bites you, what can you do? Some people will say, if the right mosquito bites you. And the miseries of the mind. Even if your body's in good health, if somebody says something or somebody does something, or some frustration that you don't get what you want, your mind could ruin everything. The miseries caused by other living beings, adibotaka, insects, humans, dogs, politicians, so many things could happen. And adi daivaka, miseries caused by nature. Too much rain, too little rain. Too much cold, too much heat. So we are subjected like that on the physical and mental level. So to try to find the happiness that we're looking for on this level is frustrating. But the Gita is telling us, and all the great scriptures are telling us, that the real happiness we're looking for is within ourselves, in our relationship with God. The Srimad Bhagavatam tells how Krishna is full of all opulences. He's one God with many names. He's the source of all beauty, all knowledge, all strength, all wealth, all fame, all renunciation. Therefore, he's all attractive. And when we simply learn to take shelter of the love, the natural love of our heart for God, for Krishna, then we realize and awaken the happiness that we've always been looking for. And it's within ourselves. We never lose it. It cannot be lost because it's who we are. We only forget it. And in that forgetfulness, it's perpetuated by being distracted, by trying to find that which is the origin of our real goal in life. We're trying to look everywhere else. So the secret of a beautiful life in this world is to learn the art of balancing. Balancing our domestic life, balancing our occupational life, balancing our physical health, and balancing our spiritual needs, the inherent needs of the soul. People want to love and be loved. Spiritual life is to find that within ourselves, in connection to God, and be an instrument of that in everything we do, wherever we go, whoever we're with. And then the disappointments and the frustrations and the pains of this world, we see them from a whole nother dimension. I remember when I was living in Himalayas on bank of Ganga, the Ganges. When you're sitting on the bank of the Ganges watching the current of the river and everything happening, because where I was sitting it was a very, very fast current. If you're in the current of the Ganges, you're being swept away by these strong waves. You'd be knocked into rocks. Very difficult to survive. But when you're sitting on the bank watching, it's a whole different experience. So when we realize who we are, we actually observe life in this world and deal with it in a responsible, compassionate way, but understand who we are, then the sufferings of the world have a different dimension. The example is given. The world is like a muddy place. And when we attain transcendental consciousness, we become like a lotus flower. The lotus is absolutely fragrant and absolutely beautiful, even when the lake is muddy. Sometimes the lake's clear, and sometimes it's muddy, but the lotus is always fresh and pure and fragrant and clean, because the lotus's roots are deep, deep beneath all of the constant changes of the lake of existence. So as well as performing our responsibility of working for our families, working for society, keeping our health. Today, I was in Karagar for an inauguration of a temple, so somehow or other, it was heartbreaking, but I missed the Mumbai Marathon. I can't say that every year I look forward to it, but I usually see it running by, everyone running by. But I missed it this year because I was somewhere far away. But this marathon, people raise funds for good causes, but also they go for health. Running is good for health. So we have to balance our health. We have to balance our mental studies. We have to balance our economic needs. If we neglect any of these things, then our life becomes off balance. But unfortunately, in this day and age, which is very different from the way it used to be in India, in this day and age, we consider so important these temporary, ever-changing responsibilities that we neglect the most serious, important responsibility of our life, to cultivate our spirituality, our bhakti, our devotion to God. And an actual full life is to balance that, to give time for it. Sometimes people tell me that I have so many responsibilities, I just don't have time to chant God's names or come to the satsang of holy people or to read, holy books. If we make something a priority, we make time for it. We'll find time for it. The problem is not that we don't have time. The problem is our priorities are off balance. We have time to eat every day. We have time to sleep every day. If we think that if I give up eating and sleeping, I could work that much more hours and I could make more money. But the reality is you'll be so tired and dysfunctional, you won't be able to do anything with quality. So if we want a spiritual quality to our life, if we want to experience that param dristva nivartate, that inner higher taste, where we work according to our duties, but we're detached. We're attached to the service we render, to the relationships connected to God, but we're detached from the physical results. Then we can be peaceful in any situation. If we want that type of detachment, that type of attachment to God, that quality in our life, inner quality, we must give time for it. And this is wisdom. The way the world is going today, it's so fast-paced. There's many good things that are coming out of it. But we have to step back and look to see what is the quality of our lives. Back in the 1950s and 60s, when Lori and Larry and Miles, and when we were watching television, the news was just two guys sitting there talking. Yes? And we would be sitting there in rapt attention. Right? Just Huntley, Brinkley or something. They'd just sit there and talk. Black and white. And we'd be in rapt attention watching. And now it's like, you're just going all over the world, and there's different people, and there's bombs exploding, and there's live broadcasts, and it just, one person talks for a second, and he goes to somewhere else, and somewhere else, and somewhere else, and all special effects, and breaking news. If someone were to try to watch those old black and whites, they'd be totally bored. Everything's so fast-paced. Technology. To make a phone call, we have to dial numbers. Always dreaded when someone had a 0 in their number, because it just took so long. And then you have to wait till... And our fingers kind of hurt by dialing numbers, but it was nice. And the interesting thing about those days, when you called somebody, you knew where they were if they answered. These days, with these cellular phones, you know, like you call somebody from New York, you call their number, where are you? And he says, I'm in Alaska. Okay. You never know where a person's going to be. I remember when cell phones first started getting popular, I didn't have one. I had a regular phone. And I called my father's phone number. This was some years ago. I expected he was home. Yes? I called him, and we talked for a few minutes. And he said, do you know where I am? I said, you're at home, aren't you? He said, I'm on the 9th hole of a golf course on a toilet seat. Okay? It's on the toilet in the 9th hole of a golf course. He told me that after our conversation. He said, I'm sorry if I interrupted you. He said. He was quite happy that I called. So just to be together, to appreciate nature, to appreciate each other. I was with some people, a devotee community. And they had offices right next to each other. Their doors, literally, if there wasn't a wall between them, they were only about 8 feet away, their 2 desks. And when they wanted to communicate with each other, they did it by email. And they told me I'm not going to mention names, but I could if you want me to privately. They told me that they talk by email so many times every day. They're right next to each other, 8 feet away, and they hadn't spoken a single word to each other in 3 months. This is not uncommon. You know, the race and the pace of technology, it has a lot of good uses, no doubt. But we have to be very careful it does not compromise the quality of our lives, the quality of our relationships. Just sitting and chanting God's name in the association of devotees. 1 hour, 2 hours. It's absolutely beautiful. The focus is on awakening that great treasure, our real inheritance that is within ourselves, and molding our life in such a way that we don't compromise quality living with the endless passion for quantity in our life. Simple living, high thinking. We really don't need much to be happy. If we have it, we use it. If we don't have it, we adjust. But we're happy. But when the mind and the society around us creates this conception of what Prabhupada called unnecessary necessities. In India, when I first came in 1970, there was practically no automobiles. There was the Ambassador and the Fiat, and only quite wealthy people could afford them. There were I don't remember any traffic jams, even in Mumbai. I'd walk around barefoot, and it was just, you know, some cars were going by. Yes, Srinathji Prabhu, Mahaprabhuji. But now, practically every member of the family, it's a necessity to have a car. And what is it doing to the quality of life, to the ecology? In those days, there were hardly any televisions in India. And the televisions that were there only had 2 or 3 stations. Only very few people had televisions. Now, Larry and Lori and I were driving back from Bhaktivedanta Hospital, and we were going through very, very poor, downtrodden ghetto neighborhoods, and 90% of the little shacks had satellite discs on the top of them. It becomes a need. And the question is, are people happier now than then? As far as I could see, definitely not. Happiness is in our relationships with each other. And most of all, happiness is in our relationship with God, with Krishna. To balance that, to focus on that. That's one of the great features that India has given to the world, is that understanding of prioritizing our spirituality and harmonizing it with every other aspect of life. But very rapidly, India is losing that. Losing its own soul. For what? So as I was saying to this young girl, who was the president of the All British Hitchhikers Association, whatever I found traveling the whole world, you can find in your little apartment in London. You don't have to travel everywhere to find what's within yourself. But for me, that's where I found out that Krishna is within my heart. The greatest of all treasures. Love for God, love for Krishna. So many things in this world are just not going to happen the way we want them to happen. And it's not that when we become devotees, things happen the way we want them to happen. Sometimes at the beginning stages we think that's what's supposed to happen. Now that I'm connected with the supreme, all-powerful controller of all controllers, he's going to control everything in the universe in such a way that nothing can stop my plans from being fulfilled. But that's not the way it works. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartanorjana. The nature of the world is what it is. And in all of our scriptures, in fact, all the great scriptures throughout the world, the histories of great saints, it's very rare or anything, even the greatest saints, what to speak of the moderate saints or the common devotee, we don't find in any of these histories that things go our way. The same kind of tragedies, the same kind of traumas, the same kinds of difficulties and challenges are there for everybody. The difference is the perspective in which we have when we're going through them. The difference is when we have wisdom, when we have knowledge, when we have devotion, the challenges that inevitably come to us, we have the equipment. We have the internal technology of wisdom to help transform that situation to bring us closer to God, closer to our true self, and deepen our own wisdom and our own realization in this ever-changing world. So to complain about what's wrong, sometimes we do that, it's a human nature. But there's something so much more that we can gain if instead of complaining, we really try to ask, what am I supposed to learn from this? When am I going to actually take very seriously excavating the great treasures that are within myself? To gain anything great in this world takes challenge. So we're going to be challenged no matter what. Why not balance that to find the greatest treasure? These are some of the thoughts that I spontaneously became inspired to share with all of you this evening. Thank you very much. And Larry, would you like to describe some of the challenges that happened after I left home?
Staying here close by to nudge me in case I cross the line. Because I know some things. Bribery may help. What else you got?
This too.
Cartles. When my brother Richie, do you mind if I call him Richie?
Just call me Swami.
You see? I'm being edited already. When the Swami first returned in 72, which we will speak of in a moment, one of the things that he brought me were brass cartles, because he knew I loved music. And I think he brought me a couple of flutes as well. But I still have those cartles from 1972 that he brought. So they're probably fairly ancient, because I assume they were forged way before that as well. Do you remember where you picked up those cartles?
No.
Anyway, he wanted me to speak about when he was away. You've all read The Journey Home?
Yes.
Raise your hand if you haven't read The Journey Home. Security? Miles, truly? Well, you'll get a copy before you leave. I know somebody that can make that happen. But anyway, it was very difficult times for us. You know, as I won't get into too much detail, because Swami already spoke of our childhood together in a village called Highland Park, and more so in a smaller area of Highland Park called Sherwood Forest, which was as magical as its name may imply. It was a very lovely place to grow up, a lot of mature trees everywhere, winding streets. We had a modest little home, which still stands today, and also in which we are very fortunate to be able to go back to that very home and hang out. It's amazing. Some of you here, some of our dear friends that have come to the States, have actually slept in our old bedroom. That's pretty amazing. But Swami decided to take his journey in 1970. And that's the same year that we sold the house shortly after he left. And we moved to Miami Beach, Florida. And we didn't hear from him for I think we heard from you a few times when you were, you know, in England and Italy. You were busking on the streets with Gary and living the bohemian lifestyle on your journey. And then all of a sudden the letters stopped, the phone calls stopped. I knew what he was up to in my heart. I knew what he was seeking, because we both shared that journey to a certain degree before he left. We shared in a lot of meditation together and different things of that sort. But my parents didn't quite understand what he was doing. Although my father, throughout his life, went out of his way to understand his children. And when Swami and I were in his basement lair doing transcendental meditation, my father wanted to know what it was all about, and he decided to get initiated into transcendental meditation. So he took his little bit of fruit and flour and went to this hotel in Evanston where they were initiating, and my father learned how to meditate. So he always pursued ways to understand his kids, sometimes extraordinary ways. But he couldn't understand why his son wasn't writing. And we were all worried. I was worried as well, not quite as much as my parents, because I had faith that he was following some path, and eventually things would turn out okay and he'd come home. But months went by, and then we got this letter. I don't know if it was the letter from Tehran, Iran. I think it was after you actually arrived in India. And it was a very cryptic letter in flowery language that we didn't understand. I think perhaps you were about to maybe fly somewhere. And I am about to embark on a great iron bird to sail above the clouds. Things of this nature. And much reference to Krishna and devoting oneself to that, higher power, whatever. I kind of sort of read through the lines and understood my parents didn't have a clue. But the periods of time that we didn't hear from my brother was very rough on them. I saw my father age because he was such a devoted father. And Swami will attest, when we were growing up, if we weren't home at 6 o'clock for dinner, they'd start making phone calls. Where's our son? Where's our son? If we stayed out beyond curfew, they'd start worrying. If we stayed over at a friend's house without telling them, forget about it. They'd be freaking out. So they were always worriers, especially my father. So he was freaking out. Whatever hair he had, I think he lost. Which wasn't a lot, but nevertheless. And I really did. I saw him age more rapidly than I thought he should be aging. And somehow I got an address for you, and I wrote you a few letters. I think you might still have them, pleading you to come home, or at least let us know what's going on, because Father is not taking this well. So by and by, time passed, and he started to get back in touch. And by this time, as I said, we had sold the house. We were living in Florida in an apartment about 2 blocks from the Atlantic Ocean. It was quite pleasant. And the Swami finally came back to the States. And I was there at the airport. And we were waiting and waiting. And finally, he came out of the gate. And at that time, he wasn't shaving his head. He had long hair. He was unshaven. He was wearing what he's wearing now, but it was very tattered and degraded. And the only possessions he had was, I think, the Bhagavad Gita in a bag and a wooden bowl, which we still have, that he used to eat out of. So we're standing in the Miami airport, and here comes this. He looked like some disheveled sadhu that came straight down from the mountains. But we embraced him. We were just so grateful that he was back with his family. And we lived on the terrace for a while because he didn't like being inside. I hung out with you all the time out there. I learned to eat with my fingers out of a bowl. It was good. Those were good times. And somewhere along the way, he learned how to do gourmet vegetarian cooking. And him and my dear mother, who we miss very much, he would give her lessons on how to cook, and they would make these feasts together. And it was quite amazing. But, he was back with his family, but his heart was elsewhere. And in America, there's a very famous song sung by a singer named Tony Bennett. It's called "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." Does anyone know that song? Well, he left his heart in India. He was here, but his heart was back there. So the only thing he could really do was find sanctuary in New Vrindavan. So that's where he went. And as he mentioned, I followed him there, and we had pleasant times on the mountaintop in a very isolated farmhouse. But still, he was still under the mode of renunciation. He wanted to renounce anything material. And at that time, that could have or could not have maybe included his family. So he didn't really, even when he was back in the States, they still worried about him because they didn't hear from him very often. So my father started doing his journeys to New Vrindavan. And where Swami chose to stay, and when I was there, also chose to stay with him, was way up high on this mountaintop in this very isolated, quiet farm. And the only way to get up there was at this, it wasn't even a road, it was just a winding dirt path. And my father had to ride in the back of an ox cart to visit my brother. You wouldn't even come down from the mountain, I don't think, the first couple times. He laughs now. So that's how they started to cultivate the deep connection that they have now. You won't find another father-son relationship like they have today. It's amazing. And many of you know Jerry. He's been here 4 times already. And so thank goodness they reconnected, and I never disconnected. But here I am. It's my first time in India, and hello. I just want to keep this brief and just say how grateful I am to be here, to be with my brother in someplace other than the United States. And to thank from the bottom of both my wife's and my hearts all the gracious hospitality that has been extended to us in our brief stay. The generosity is overwhelming. And we've joined your family here. And we feel the friends that we made are more than friends, but they're family. And we'll be back. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
May I be excused now?
Please.